Two police cruisers lit up my driveway like I'd just robbed a bank, not tightened bolts on an old wooden dock. The red and blue reflections sliced across Cedar Ridge Lake, and for one ridiculous second I actually wondered if I'd done something wrong. Then I saw her Tiffany Hargrove blazer, two crisp pearls, too shiny, standing behind the officers with the kind of smile people wear when they think they're about to win. I'd come back to this little cabin for peace. Instead, my first week home turned into a full-blown war with the HOA, and the night they tried to have me arrested was only the opening punch. My name's Ethan Walker. I'm 32. I build things for a living: bridges, retaining walls, drainage systems, the unglamorous stuff that keeps everything from collapsing. I'm the guy who reads plans, checks measurements twice, and hates surprises. Which is funny because the cabin I inherited on Cedar Ridge Lake is basically a surprise wrapped in grief. My grandfather, Frank Walker, died in the spring. He left me the cabin, the little boathouse, and the dock he built back in 1946, when this place was just trees and mosquitoes and people who minded their own business. I grew up here every summer fishing with him, learning how to sand splinters out of my hands, listening to him tell stories about back when the lake was quiet. I came back because I missed that quiet. I needed it. I'd been burning out at my job, and losing him felt like someone cut the power to the only part of my life that made sense. So I took time off, packed my truck, and drove out to Cedar Ridge thinking I'd fix a few boards, paint the cabin, and sit on the dock at night like I used to. The first few days were exactly that. I woke up early, coffee in hand, birds yelling at the sunrise. I replaced two rotten planks on the dock, tightened rusted bolts, scrubbed algae off the ladder. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt right. Like I was touching something my grandfather built with his own hands and promising him I'd take care of it. Then on day 4, I heard tires on gravel, fast, aggressive, like whoever it was didn't care that this was a private lane. I looked up and saw two sheriff's cruisers swinging into my driveway, lights flashing. One of them parked sideways like they were blocking an escape route. The other rolled up close enough that I could see my own startled face in the windshield reflection. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked up the dock toward the shore, trying to look calm, even though my stomach was doing that hollow drop thing. One officer stepped out, hand resting near his holster, not quite casual. The second followed, scanning the property like he expected someone to jump out of the bushes. "Sir," the first one said. "You Ethan Walker?" "Yes," I answered, holding my hands out, palms visible. "What's going on?" "We received a call about trespassing," he said. "Reported illegal entry onto HOA-controlled property." HOA-controlled property. On my dock. On my grandfather's dock. And then Tiffany stepped forward from behind them like she'd been waiting for her cue. Mid-40s blonde hair arranged in a helmet, lipstick perfect. She had that performative, concerned citizen posture, shoulders back, chin, lifted eyes wide like she was the victim in her own little movie. "That's him," she said, pointing at me as if I was a stray dog she wanted removed. "He's been warned multiple times. He's refusing to comply." I blinked. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Her smile got bigger. "Tiffany Hargrove, president of Cedar Ridge Shores Homeowners Association." She said it like it should mean something to the U.S. Constitution. "This dock is a community asset. He's modifying it without approval. He's intimidating residents. I'm sorry, I cut in because my brain was trying to keep up with the absurdity. "This dock is on my deed." The officer looked between us. "Do you have documentation on the property boundaries?" I actually laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. Not because it was funny, but because I was so relieved the question was sane. "Yeah," I said. "Give me 2 minutes." Tiffany's eyes narrowed. "He's lying. He's trying to confuse you. We have bylaws. We have—" The second officer held a hand up. "Ma'am, let him get his paperwork." I jogged up to the cabin, heart pounding. Inside, I grabbed the folder my grandfather kept in the kitchen drawer, the one wrapped in a rubber band like it was a sacred thing. Deed, survey, tax records, a yellowed map with surveyor stamps. I'd looked at it already, mostly out of nostalgia, but also because, well, I'm me. I like knowing what I own. When I came back out, Tiffany had moved closer to the officers, talking fast, like she was trying to fill the space before the truth landed. "And he's not even a member," she was saying. He can't just come in here and—" I handed the folder to the officer. He flipped through it, eyes scanning the legal description. The second officer leaned in. Their faces changed, not dramatic, just subtle, the way people look when they realize they've been dragged into somebody else's nonsense. The first officer nodded slowly. "This survey shows the dock is within your parcel line." Tiffany's smile twitched. "That survey is old. The HOA." The officer looked up at her. "Ma'am, HOA documents don't override county records. If you have a dispute, that's civil. But this isn't trespassing." Her cheeks flushed. "So you're just going to let him—" "We're going to leave," the officer said, calm but firm. He handed me back my folder. "Sir, sorry for the disturbance. If they return and refuse to leave, call us." Tiffany stared at me like I'd personally humiliated her in front of the world. And in that moment, I should have understood something important. People like Tiffany don't walk away when they lose. They just change weapons. The cruisers rolled out. The lake went quiet again. But it wasn't the peaceful quiet I'd come for. It was that tense, waiting quiet, like the air right before a storm breaks open. The next morning I found 3 pieces of paper stapled to my wooden gate. Not taped. Stapled. Like a warning. The first was titled, "Unsafe Structure Notice," in bold, dramatic letters. The second was an invoice, $7, $200 dock maintenance fee delinquent. The third was a summons to appear before the Architectural Review Committee for unauthorized modifications to community property. I stood there reading it twice, then a third time because my brain refused to accept that someone printed an invoice for thousands of dollars and slapped it on my private gate like it was normal. I could practically hear my grandfather's voice in my head. "Don't let bullies make you small." I pulled the papers off and the staples ripped tiny holes in the wood. Little ugly punctures that didn't need to be there. That's what Tiffany was good at, making damage where there didn't need to be any. Always just enough to remind you she could. My first instinct was to ignore it. I'd dealt with petty people before. You don't feed them, they lose interest. That's how it's supposed to work. Except the HOA didn't lose interest. It multiplied. 2 days later, 3 people showed up in matching navy jackets that said HOA Compliance Team on the back. One of them carried a clipboard like it was a badge. Another held his phone up recording before he even stepped onto my property. The third had that anxious energy of someone who knows they're doing something wrong but wants to pretend it's brave. They walked up my driveway like they owned it. "Mr. Walker, clipboard guy," called out, "we're here for an inspection." An inspection of what I asked, stepping onto my porch. He smiled like we were neighbors chatting over a fence. "Septic compliance, shoreline adherence, dock safety. You've been reported for unapproved alterations." "I don't have a septic system," I said. "And you're not the county." Clipboard guy's smile tightened. Refusal to comply will result in escalating fines and potential enforcement action. I looked past him at phone guy, who was filming my face like he was catching a criminal confession. "You're filming me. It's for documentation," phone guy said, a little too eager. I leaned on the porch railing and kept my voice level. "You have 60 seconds to turn around and walk off my property. After that, I'm calling the sheriff and reporting trespass." Clipboard guy's eyes flicked nervous. "We have authority." "No, you have jackets," I said, and I heard the sarcasm slip out. "There's a difference." Phone guy angled the camera higher. "He's being hostile," he said loudly, like the camera needed audio proof. "I'm being clear," I corrected. 60 seconds. They stood there for a beat, trying to decide if I was bluffing. Then clipboard guy lifted his chin in that fake power way and said, "Fine, we'll note your non-compliance." "Great," I said. "Note it from the road." They left tires spitting gravel. I watched them go, and my hands were shaking, not from fear exactly, but from the sheer audacity. The kind of anger that makes your skin feel hot. That night I didn't sleep well. Every creak of the cabin made me sit up. Every flicker of shadow outside made my eyes snap to the window. I told myself I was being ridiculous. This was an HOA, not the mafia. But then I checked my security camera footage in the morning and saw a man I didn't recognize standing near the property line at 2:13 a.m. He wasn't wearing a jacket. He wasn't holding a clipboard. He was just standing there staring at my dock like he was taking mental notes. He turned his head slowly as if he sensed the camera, and the angle caught his face for a second. Sharp jaw, dark hair, eyes like a cold calculation. The next afternoon I saw him in daylight. He was in a gray SUV parked on the street, windows down, arm resting on the door. When I walked out to check my mail, he climbed out like he'd been waiting. "Ethan Walker," he said, like he was reading it off a spreadsheet. "That's me," I replied, keeping my posture relaxed, though my pulse jumped. "And you are?" "Grant Maddox," he said, "HOA treasurer." Of course. Because Tiffany couldn't just be dramatic alone, she needed an accountant villain. Grant smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're causing a lot of disruption." "I fixed a dock," I said. "That's not disruption, that's maintenance." "You're not a member," he said, like that was the entire argument. You don't get to operate as if you're part of the community while refusing to follow community standards. I stared at him. "I own my property. I pay my taxes. That's my standard." Grant took a step closer and his voice dropped smooth and quiet. "This area was designed to be cohesive. Private owners create problems. You're a problem." There it was. Not fines, not bylaws, the truth. They didn't like that I was outside their control. "Let me make this simple," I said. "Stay off my property." Grant's smile widened just a little. "We'll see." He got back into his SUV and drove away slowly like he wanted me to watch him leave. And I stood there with a weird chill crawling up my spine because something about him felt different than Tiffany. Tiffany was loud power. Grant was quiet power. Tiffany would scream. Grant would sign a paper that ruined your month. I called a local attorney the next day. Her name was Lauren Pierce, and she sounded like someone who'd spent her whole career listening to entitled people talk themselves into lawsuits. I sat in her small office staring at framed maps on the walls while she flipped through my deed and survey. "She called the police?" Lauren asked, eyebrows raised. "Twice," I said. "Once already, and I'm pretty sure she'll do it again." Lauren set the papers down and tapped the survey with a pen. "Your dock is on your parcel. HOA can't claim it." "But," she paused, eyes narrowing. "This is interesting." What I asked, leaning forward. She rotated her computer monitor toward me. On the screen was a county map of the lake parcels. A patchwork quilt of lots, most of them labeled under the HOA's umbrella. Except mine. Mine sat like a stubborn puzzle piece that didn't match the pattern. "They're trying to control the shoreline," Lauren said. "They've been consolidating. If they can claim the northern edge, they can basically control lake access, enforce fees, dictate improvements. Everything. Your parcel interrupts the clean line they want." "So I'm a nuisance," I said. "You're a barrier," she corrected. "And Tiffany doesn't strike me as the kind of person who accepts barriers." I swallowed. "What do I do?" Lauren leaned back. "You document everything. Every notice, every interaction. You don't yell. You don't touch anyone. You let them hang themselves with their own paperwork." I wanted to feel empowered by that. Instead, I felt tired. Like I'd driven here to mourn my grandfather, and now I was being drafted into a legal war. But I listened. I installed extra cameras, one aimed at the dock, one at the driveway, one at the side yard near the property line. I saved every email the HOA sent, every letter, every invoice. I started a folder on my laptop called HOA BS, like a grown man who'd been forced into naming things like a teenager. And then one morning I walked down to the dock and froze. A bright orange X was sprayed on one of the support posts, like a construction mark. Like a demolition target. My stomach turned. I crouched inspecting the bolts. Two of them looked wrong. Not rusted wrong. Recently loosened wrong. Like someone had taken a wrench to them and backed them out just enough to weaken the structure. I stood there staring at my grandfather's dock, and I felt something snap inside me, some mix of fear and fury. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It was sabotage. I pulled up the camera footage from the night before. At 1:47 a.m., the dock camera caught a figure walking onto the planks with a flashlight. He moved like he knew what he was doing. He knelt by the post, reached into a pocket, and sprayed the orange X. Then he leaned down with a tool, something metal glinting, and worked at the bolts. When he stood up, the camera caught his face for half a second. "Grant Maddox." My hand started shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. I replayed it. Again. Again. Like watching it enough times would make it less real. It didn't. I sat on the edge of the dock after that, staring at the water, trying to breathe. The lake was calm. The world was normal. But in my chest, something was collapsing. Because suddenly, I wasn't just fighting paperwork. I was fighting people who would physically damage property to prove a point. And I have to be honest, this is where my confidence cracked. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the lights off, staring at the folder of documents, the stack of notices, the camera screenshots. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. I didn't even notice. I thought about the money I'd already spent on cameras, repairs, lawyer consultations. I thought about how my job expected me back soon. I thought about how I'd come here to heal, not to fight. And a horrible question whispered in my head. What if I'm the problem? Not logically, not legally, emotionally. What if I should just sell the cabin, take the check and be done? What if my grandfather's dock wasn't worth this? What if I was clinging to nostalgia and letting it ruin my life? I actually typed out a text to Lauren. I don't know if I can keep doing this. My thumb hovered over send. I felt sick, weak, like I was betraying my grandfather by even considering it. Then I heard his voice again, not as a memory, but as a feeling, his hands guiding mine as a kid showing me how to drive a nail straight. Steady, patient. You don't quit because someone yells kid, he used to say. You quit when you're wrong. Are you wrong? I looked at my deed, my survey, the footage of Grant loosening bolts like a thief in the dark. No, I wasn't wrong. I sent Lauren a different text. I have footage. They're sabotaging the dock. Her reply came fast. Save it. Back it up. Don't confront them alone. I'm bringing in the county. The next day, a county inspector showed up, Megan Cole. She wore a plain jacket, hair pulled back, clipboard that actually meant something. She walked the dock, crouched at the bolts, ran her fingers over the fresh tool marks. These were manipulated recently, she said, quiet but certain. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. So I'm not crazy. Megan gave me a look that said she'd seen this story before. You're not crazy, and you're not the first. That hit me like a cold slap. What do you mean? She glanced up at this cabin, then back at me. HOA complaints, anonymous reports, unsafe structures, environmental violations. I've been out here 3 times this year, same neighborhood, same leadership. My jaw tightened. Tiffany. Megan didn't say her name. She didn't have to. I showed Megan the footage. She watched in silence, and when Grant's face flashed on screen, she exhaled slowly. That's a problem, she said. You can do something I asked. I can refer it, she said. And I can document what I see. But you need to understand something, Mr. Walker. People like this count on you getting tired. I nodded, because that was exactly what had almost happened. After Megan left, I drove to the county records office. I asked for HOA filings related to lake access, shoreline claims, anything that mentioned community property. A woman at the counter, Linda Price, name tag slightly crooked, looked at me like she could tell I'd already had a week. HOA trouble, she asked. I gave a short laugh. Is it that obvious? Linda disappeared into the back and came out with a stack of paperwork that smelled like dust and bureaucracy. Among it was a map the HOA had submitted, hand-drawn lines, no surveyor stamp, no notarization, just a bold shaded area labeled Community Shoreline. My dock was inside the shaded area. I stared at it, then pulled out my grandfather's old survey map from my folder. Official stamps, measurements, coordinates, clean lines drawn by someone who actually knew what they were doing. The HOA map looked like a kid's crayon project compared to it. They filed this, I asked, voice flat. Linda shrugged, but her eyes were sympathetic. They file a lot of things. A heat rose in my chest. Not wild anger, something sharper. Like clarity. They weren't mistaken. They weren't confused. They were lying, and they'd been lying long enough that people believed them. I left the office with copies, hands tight on the steering wheel, mind racing. Lauren was right. This was bigger than me. And then Lauren called me the next morning, and her voice had that edge it gets when a lawyer smells blood in the water. Ethan, she said, I found something. What I asked, already bracing. You know the parcel Tiffany keeps calling Community Shoreline, Lauren said. It's not owned by the HOA. I pulled over because my brain needed my car to stop moving. What do you mean? I mean it's owned by a dormant LLC, she said. And it's behind on property taxes. 3 years. It's scheduled for a tax lien auction. My heart thumped so hard it felt like it hit my ribs. An auction? Yes, Lauren said. Public. Anyone can bid. I swallowed. So Tiffany has been controlling something she doesn't actually own, Lauren said. And if she's been collecting fees or asserting authority based on that, that's a serious problem. I stared out at the lake, the water glittering like it didn't care about human stupidity. "When's the auction?" "2 weeks," Lauren said. "And Ethan, listen. If someone buys that parcel, they control the shoreline segment Tiffany has been using as leverage." My mind clicked through possibilities like a machine. If Tiffany bought it, she'd cement her power forever. If Grant bought it, same thing. If some random investor bought it, they'd turn it into a nightmare. If I bought it, the thought made my throat go dry. "How much is the lien?" $14,800, Lauren said. I didn't answer right away because I was doing math in my head, and the math made me feel nauseous. My savings after the cabin repairs and time off was about 16 grand. That was it. That was my safety net, my emergency fund, my adult life cushion. Buying that parcel would drain me down to almost nothing. I got home and opened my banking app like it was going to magically change. It didn't. That night I sat on the dock again, feet dangling above the water, listening to frogs and distant traffic, and I felt the weight of the decision press on me. I could walk away, sell the cabin, let Tiffany keep playing Queen of the Lake, or I could do something that felt insane, risky, borderline reckless, and end this. My grandfather built this dock with his hands. He built it so his family could sit here and breathe. Tiffany and Grant were trying to turn it into a revenue stream and a control point. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something that made me furious all over again. They weren't just targeting me. They'd probably done this to other people, quietly, one by one, until nobody had the energy to fight back. I went inside, pulled out the folder, and made a new one called Auction. 2 weeks later, I walked into the county courthouse like I was walking into a boxing ring. The hallway smelled like old paper and cheap coffee. A handful of people stood around holding envelopes. Some looked bored, some looked hungry. And then I saw Tiffany. Of course she was there. White blazer, pearls, hair perfect. She stood with Grant near the back, talking in low voices. Grant's eyes flicked toward me, and for the first time I saw something crack through his calm mask. Worry. Tiffany's face tightened when she recognized me, but she recovered fast, floating toward me like she owned the air. "Ethan," she said, sugary, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm full of surprises," I said, and the sarcasm came out smoother than I expected. She leaned closer, smile still bright but her eyes sharp. "This isn't your world. These things get complicated. You could get hurt financially." Grant stepped in, voice low. "Go home." I looked at them both, and I felt something solid settle in my chest. Not bravado, not rage, just certainty. "You tried to have me arrested," I said quietly. "You sabotaged my dock. You stapled fake invoices to my gate. Don't pretend you're worried about my finances." Tiffany's smile twitched like a glitch. "Watch your tone." I laughed once under my breath. "My tone? Tiffany, you called the sheriff on a man fixing his own dock. You lost the right to tone police me." Her eyes narrowed, and for a second the mask slipped. "You don't belong here," she hissed. And I realized that's what this was always about. Not docks, not rules, belonging, control. She decided who mattered, who got to stay, who got crushed. The clerk called the parcel number. People shuffled into a small room. We sat on hard chairs like we were waiting for a dentist, except the dentist was going to pull your bank account out by the roots. The clerk read the opening bid. $14,800. My heart hammered. My hand felt heavy as I raised it. "I'll bid the opening," I said. Tiffany snapped her head toward me like I'd slapped her. Grant's jaw tightened. The clerk nodded. "We have 14,800. Any higher bids?" Silence. I waited for Tiffany to raise her hand, for Grant to jump in, for anyone to outbid me. But Tiffany didn't move. And suddenly I understood why. If she bid, she'd be admitting in a public room that the shoreline wasn't HOA property. She'd be admitting the whole community asset thing was a lie. She was trapped by her own performance. The clerk looked around again. "Any higher bids?" Grant's eyes flicked to Tiffany. Tiffany stared straight ahead, face rigid. Her hands clenched in her lap so tight I could see the knuckles whiten. The clerk cleared his throat. "Going once, going twice." My pulse screamed in my ears. "Sold," the clerk said, hitting the gavel. For a second the room didn't feel real, like someone had turned the volume down on the world. I signed papers with a pen that scratched like it was carving my name into stone. I handed over the cashier's check and watched my savings disappear in an instant. Tiffany stood up abruptly, chair legs scraping. Her smile was gone now. She marched out of the room without looking at me, and Grant followed, his face tight and pale like he'd swallowed something bitter. I walked outside into the sunlight, papers in hand, and the lake breeze hit my face. I should have felt relief, victory. Instead, I felt quiet, like I'd just stepped off a cliff and landed on my feet and my body hadn't caught up yet. The next morning, I woke up to tires on gravel again. My stomach clenched until I saw it was the sheriff, not the HOA. Sheriff Daniel Reyes stepped out calm and solid, 2 deputies behind him. He carried a folder under his arm, the kind of folder that makes people stop pretending. "Mr. Walker," he said, shaking my hand, "you filed a trespass report and submitted video evidence." "Yes," I said, voice steady. He nodded. "We've reviewed it." Behind him, 1 deputy carried a cordless drill. The other carried a plastic evidence bag. Sheriff Reyes pointed toward the dock. "We're going to remove unauthorized signage and document the area. That shoreline parcel now belongs to you, correct?" I held up the papers like a shield. "As of yesterday, yes." "Good," he said. "Then this will be simple." We walked down together. At the edge of the dock there, it was an ugly sign bolted into the railing, "HOA access only. Trespassers will be fined." It made my skin crawl because it wasn't just a sign. It was a threat, a lie hammered into wood. The deputy with the drill didn't hesitate. Bzzzt. Screws popped free. The sign came loose and he slipped it into the evidence bag like it was contraband. Sheriff Reyes turned to me. "If anyone places signage on your property again, call us immediately." I nodded, and for the first time in weeks my shoulders loosened. Then Sheriff Reyes looked up toward the street. "We're also going to speak with Ms. Hargrove." My heart thumped. "You're going to her house?" He gave me a look that was almost tired. People can file complaints, they can argue, they can be obnoxious, but when they fabricate reports, harass residents, and tamper with structures, that crosses into criminal territory. We drove up the road. Tiffany's house was exactly what you'd expect, perfect landscaping wreath on the door, even though it wasn't a holiday, 2 cars in the driveway like trophies. Sheriff Reyes knocked. Tiffany opened the door almost immediately, like she'd been watching through the peephole. She was dressed like she was heading to a meeting because of course she was. Her eyes flicked to me and flashed with pure hatred before she forced her expression into polite shock. "Sheriff," she said sweetly, "what can I do for you?" Sheriff Reyes didn't smile. "Ms. Hargrove, we're here regarding multiple false reports, harassment complaints, and property tampering. We also have evidence of unauthorized signage placed on property you do not own." Tiffany's face tightened. "That's ridiculous. The HOA." "The HOA does not own the shoreline parcel," Sheriff Reyes interrupted, voice flat. "Mr. Walker does." Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she didn't have a speech ready. Grant appeared behind her in the hallway, and when he saw the deputies, his shoulders sank like he already knew. Tiffany found her voice again sharp now. "This is a misunderstanding. He's trying to undermine the community. Sheriff Reyes held up a hand. "Ma'am, stop. We're not here for a debate. We're here to inform you that an investigation is being opened. Any further contact with Mr. Walker or entry onto his property will be treated as trespass. Any additional false reporting will be treated accordingly." Tiffany's eyes went wide and her voice cracked. Actually cracked when she snapped, "You can't do this." Sheriff Reyes looked at her like she was a child screaming at gravity. "We can, and we are." Her gaze darted to Grant like she wanted him to fix it. Grant didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there, pale, the calm gone, replaced by the quiet terror of a man realizing paper games don't work when the law shows up. Tiffany's lips pressed into a hard line. Her chin lifted in one last attempt at dignity, but it looked brittle now, like porcelain about to shatter. And that's when it hit me. Standing on her pristine porch with the sheriff beside me, her power was never real. It was a costume, a performance that worked only because everyone else played along. The sheriff turned away, done with her. The deputies followed. Tiffany stayed frozen in the doorway, eyes burning, but she didn't follow. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Not with law enforcement standing right there, not with her lies finally exposed. As we walked back down the driveway, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. Tiffany was still there, clutching the doorframe like it was the last thing keeping her upright, watching her little kingdom slip through her fingers. I didn't wave, I didn't smirk, I just kept walking. Because the truth is, I didn't come to Cedar Ridge to win anything. I came to breathe. And the moment Tiffany lost, when the sheriff said investigation, when the sign went into an evidence bag, when her words stopped working, I felt the lake go quiet again. Real quiet. Lesson paper bullies only win when you let their lies become your reality.